At the edge of the scorching Kalahari Desert lies a vast oasis, where Africa's great animals roam wild, and humans come in wonder. But during the summer, in the space of just 1 week, 2 ferocious attacks reveal the surprising fury of an ancient and awesome creature. Why has it suddenly attacked humans? And will it attack again? Solving this mystery requires 2 teams of experts, one in Africa and the other in the United States. They must uncover the clues and unravel the secrets
Something right there.
behind these deadly assaults. They will discover who is the hunter and who is the hunted. On a beautiful summer's day in December, Bruce and Janice Simpson arrived in Botswana to celebrate their honeymoon. They had come to a place that many people call Africa's last and greatest paradise, the Okavango Delta. This is where the crystalline waters of a wayward river empty into the sands of the Kalahari Desert. They create the largest oasis on Earth, a giant delta that provides a haven for Africa's most famous creatures and its most deadly predators. Several days into their stay, Bruce and Janice decided to take a wildlife tour accompanied by a local guide. To reach the prime viewing areas, they had to cross the wetlands that lay just beyond their lodge. The waters were tranquil as their guide poled the canoe. Calm and silent, this was the ideal way to view animals up close. At about 10 o'clock, they began to return to the camp. There were few signs of wildlife. Suddenly, without warning, something erupted from the water beside the boat. The impact hurled Bruce beneath the surface, and the creature seized Janice in its enormous jaws. The dream honeymoon had become a nightmare. But what animal would have been bold enough to attack a boat full of people? The waters of the Okavango are ruled by one predator, the Nile crocodile. These creatures can grow more than 6 meters long and weigh over 500 kilograms. Their massive jaws are lined with 5-centimeter long teeth, which they can shut with 1,000 kilograms of force. And they are infamous man-eaters. One giant crocodile in Uganda is believed to have killed more than 80 people. Few would have been surprised if this were the predator that had attacked Janice Simpson, but her husband's account of the incident revealed a very different creature.
All I saw as I turned was a grey mass to my right, literally half a meter away from me. Basically, the girth of its chest was as wide as the section that Jan and I were sitting one behind the other.
Her attacker wasn't a crocodile. In fact, it wasn't even a creature that we think of as a predator. It was an animal that many people consider a lazy, harmless, and even comic grazer. The hippopotamus. But this sluggish stereotype couldn't be further from the truth. Year after year, hippos are believed to attack and kill more people in Africa than any other animal. Despite their great girth, they can reach speeds of nearly 50 kilometers per hour, twice that of most humans. The impact of a full-sized bull at speed is the same as being hit by a truck. Inside their enormous jaws, hippos have long tusks that can pierce adversaries with incredible effect. They have been known to sever 4-meter-long crocodiles completely in half. This was the surprising animal that had attacked the honeymooners' boat.
It had almost that impact sound of when you have a car accident. And then the next thing I was under the water. I couldn't see anything.
Bruce struggled to stand, but he couldn't. The hippo's passing surge had dislocated his shoulder and trapped him beneath the surface.
The force of it pushed me right down into the mud. I knew the water was only just above my head. I was at risk of drowning.
Eventually, he broke free.
The first thing, I looked for my wife. I couldn't see her. She wasn't there. The makoro wasn't there. She was nowhere to be seen.
What had happened to Janice? And why had the creature attacked? Hippos take human lives all over Africa, but details of most of these incidents are hard to come by. The animals are difficult to study, and scientists know surprisingly little about them. The astonishing assault on Bruce and Janice Simpson seemed to be a freak and random act, until a second encounter, just 1 week later. It was almost sunset when it happened, on another branch of the Okavango's life-giving waterways. Diana Tilden Davis knew this territory well. The former Miss South Africa had worked there as a guide for years, since retiring from pageant life. This was a world she understood and loved. On this day, she was completing work on a documentary she hoped would show millions of others the unique beauty and vulnerability of the Delta. There was just one shot to finish before the team wrapped. The director steadied the boat for the camera, and Diana pulled it forward. Then, suddenly, without warning, a hippo charged from just a few meters away. Instinctively, Diana struck with her pole to slow its advance and yelled at the others to scatter.
Guys, get out! Get out! Go!
She was left facing the ferocious beast alone. Two attacks just days apart had put 2 women at risk and shaken the tranquility of this African paradise. But were they isolated incidents, or was there a connection, something that had made these animals deadly? Two women had been attacked in the Okavango Delta. Were they victims of accidental assaults, or were the attacks deliberate? Many people in Africa and elsewhere believe that hippos are nearsighted, and therefore unable to distinguish between things that are dangerous and those that are not. If this were in fact the case, the hippos may have attacked Janice and Diana because they saw the women's boats poorly, and perhaps mistook them for advancing crocodiles. But there are 2 things wrong with this theory. Hippos and crocodiles don't usually fight. In fact, the giants often live side by side under a lasting, if uneasy, truce. And nearsightedness is an unlikely cause for another reason. The hippo's poor eyesight is a myth.
Do hippos have poor vision?
There is no evidence for it.
Professor Bill Barklow has studied hippos for decades.
At night, when I'm in the field, if I shine a flashlight in a hippo's face, the eyes shine back to me, like a deer in the headlights of a car. There's a special membrane in there that reflects the light that allows them to see better at night.
No one has yet been able to test hippo vision, but other animals with eyeshine, like dogs, have astonishing visual capabilities.
Dogs have been tested very carefully, and they have incredible vision at night, like a night vision scope. And so it's likely hippos can see that well at night.
Professor Greg Erickson is a biologist at Florida State University.
Of course, dogs and cats, which have great night vision, also have great daylight vision. So there's no reason to suppose that hippos can't see well in the daytime as well.
Yeah, I'm quite certain that during the day they see as well as we do, and at night much better.
Poor vision couldn't have accounted for either of the attacks in the Delta. But details of the Simpson incident suggested another possible motive. The honeymooners had encountered the hippo on their return journey across the wetland on their way back to the lodge. But while following their intended route, they had encountered an obstacle, something that blocked their way and made them change course. Elephants.
So we stopped and we waited for them for a while. And in fact, the guide banged his pole on the Mokoro a few times to try and make some noise, try and get them to move off. We had sort of waited for these elephants for about 5 or 6 minutes, and so Jan and I said, well, you know, if there's another way back, let's go.
The pilot steered the Mokoro away from the giants.
And we were looking for another channel to basically cut across this waterway to get back to the camp.
They found one, but it was much narrower, barely arm's length across, and choked on either side by thick reeds. It was down this channel that the hippo lay in wait. Narrow channels like these can be especially hazardous to navigate.
Yeah, with this canal, the canal is quite open, but once you look to the side, the visibility is quite limited. I mean, it varies between, what would you say?
A meter, half a meter, at the best a meter and a half.
Erties Rohn is a game management officer who regularly traps and moves hippos.
Hippo has got extremely good eyesight. They can spot you 200 yards away, but in this circumstances here, visibility is absolutely limited to 3 to 6 feet. There is no ways that you can see any further than that.
So visibility is definitely a problem.
Johan Eckstein is chief ecologist for a South African game park.
Remember, hippo's eyes are at water level, so he's even more limited than we are, because we at least have some depth here.
Despite its excellent eyesight, the hippo's view would have been obstructed by the thick reeds, making it difficult, perhaps even impossible, for it to see the humans as they approached. Did the tourists startle the hippo? Hippos, like most animals, rely on more than eyesight for information, and their other senses are also incredibly sharp.
They can smell you 100 meters away, the slightest change in the wind, and they would immediately know you are there. Their hearing, just the slightest brush of clothing against some foreign object, and they know that there is human activity. So I cannot see how an animal could not have sensed that there is human activity here.
The hippo must have known that humans were approaching, but that doesn't explain why it attacked them. Hippos are more likely to take flight than stay and fight. They are shy, skittish creatures, and they tend to avoid humans if at all possible. So why didn't this one run away? It's possible that it was protecting its home turf. Male hippos are highly territorial in the water and defend their terrain with intimidation and violence. The bulls use ritualized threats, often misunderstood by humans as sleepy yawns, to intimidate others with their size and weaponry. If that fails, the combatants sometimes lock together and test each other's strength. These shoving matches can turn into all-out battles, and a fight can easily become to the death. A hippo's jaws are well equipped for this sort of struggle.
Although this is quite a young bull, it clearly shows how this animal's skull was designed. You can see these teeth have no grazing value. The grazing is done with their lips. That is for defense.
The continuously growing tusks are kept razor sharp.
This is not quite even a large one, they get much bigger, but this is, now they actually sharpen against each other, honing from the top and the other one from the bottom, and that keeps this one sharp all the time.
This was the weaponry that Janice Simpson faced. Bruce searched desperately for his bride and finally saw her.
I rushed over and I turned her over, and she had been bitten through the chest, in the front and through the back, and she'd been bitten in the head, and she was just losing blood so quickly. There was just blood everywhere.
Bruce and the guide did everything they could to save her, but Janice Simpson died almost instantly. In the wake of the tragedy, Bruce recalled an unsettling detail about the attack, one that questioned territory as a motive. By the time Bruce surfaced, the assailant was gone.
I heard the animal disappearing, and it was already gone. I mean, it was literally a few split seconds.
The hippo ran away. But dominant bulls don't abandon their turf, and they don't leave their females unguarded.
Don't you think that a territorial dispute could have played a role here?
No, it's unlikely, because a territorial bull would be with the females. But in this case, there was only mention of a lone hippo.
This hippo was alone.
Dominant hippo bull in this territory would be with the herd. It's unlikely that the animal would do this for territorial reasons.
Yeah.
Janice Simpson wasn't attacked by a territorial bull, and neither was Diana Tilden Davis. Like Janice, she also encountered a lone hippo far from an established herd. But in her case, the animal continued its assault. Diana managed to fight off the hippo's initial surge, but it charged a second time and crashed into her boat. She fought for traction as she slid towards its jaws. If this wasn't a territorial attack, then what was it? And why was it so ferocious? The two women attacked in the Okavango Delta had both encountered lone animals that were a long way from a herd. It's unusual for a hippo to be alone. They usually congregate in groups and rarely abandon the comfort and security of the herd.
One thing that still worries me is, why was this animal alone? Why was this an isolated animal?
Another encounter, also with a lone hippo, raised one possible explanation for this behavior. Danny Maini was in South Africa's Kruger National Park, enjoying a weekend getaway with his family. On their first day there, his niece, Anina, asked him for a favor.
Early that morning, Anina wants to go and see the hippos at the viewpoint.
They stopped at an overlook to watch a large herd of hippos resting in the river below. The animals seemed calm, and the two enjoyed the view. They stayed there for a quarter of an hour before walking back. Along the way, they encountered Danny's wife, Anarchy. The three decided to do some further exploration together.
We asked one of the workers there for the best place to go and view the area, and he showed us the dam. The minute we reached at that point, we did see the hippo inside the dam.
1 kilometer from the river and the rest of the herd was a lone hippo waiting in the water.
Our reaction was, what a beautiful animal. We didn't realize what's the danger of the animal.
The family watched the giant creature for a while. Then Danny headed off to catch up with the rest of the family. He was about 5 minutes down the path when he heard a scream. Anina was rushing towards him, terrified.
And she said, no, the hippo did bite Aniki.
Danny raced to help his wife.
I've called her and said, Aniki, where are you?
He arrived to find a horrifying scene.
I see her, and she said, just bear in mind that I love you.
Anarchy Maini died moments later. Like the women attacked in the Delta, she too had encountered a solitary hippo. But Anarchy may have left a clue as to why she was attacked. She had captured her killer on video.
This is a video that was taken by Anarchy Maini the morning that she was attacked.
So far, this looks like a normal hippo behavior here. It's just resting there in the water near the reeds. The water's probably just the right depth for her to lift her head and get a breath.
So this animal doesn't look agitated or anything like that at this point.
It looks like a contented hippo. Doesn't look aggressive at all right now.
The final images on the videotape revealed why this placid animal turned lethal.
Yeah, well, there's a calf, and a young calf at that, so this is a very newborn baby.
The calf had made the mother hippo a force to be feared.
So this female could be very protective in this situation?
Yes. Mothers with calves will attack anything that comes near them, including human beings. They are very aggressive at this stage.
Were the solitary animals that had attacked Janice and Diana also mothers protecting their young? Few predators would dare take on an adult hippo, but calves are fair game. Lions, hyenas, and even pythons will attack these 50-kilogram morsels. Mothers have to be vigilant to protect their offspring, even from other hippos.
They usually separate from the bigger herd, in some cases as far as a kilometer away from the herd in a little secluded pool. The biggest threat to a baby hippo is trampling by other hippo.
But a shocking new discovery has revealed that it's not just the adult's bulk that's a threat. Male hippos are now known to deliberately kill infants, presumably the offspring of other males. This infanticide means that the female becomes ready to breed more quickly, and it reduces competition for the bull's future bloodline. So to keep their infants from harm, new mothers must hide away from the herd. All three attacks had been made by solitary hippos. However, it's unlikely that the attacks in the delta were made by ferocious mothers, because neither location was well suited to calves.
This thick reed bed here, this is not typical of reeds where a female would have a calf.
No, this is definitely not typical of a female, because they usually look for open areas on the side as well. Yes, reeds on the sides of the pool, but definitely an area on open land, on land where they can get out of the water.
Like their parents, baby hippos don't swim, they walk on the bottom. So they need a beach nearby where they can get out of the deep water to rest. Neither attack took place near such a nursery. But if the lone hippos that had charged Janice and Diana weren't protecting their young, and they weren't defending their territory, then why had they attacked? Diana was facing a potentially lethal assailant. The animal had shrugged off her initial defense and charged her a second time. By staying to fight, she had bought time for her colleagues to escape. But finally, Diana slipped, and her leg slid into range. A single bite virtually severed her left calf. And the animal didn't let go. There could be a surprising reason for this ferocity. In addition to infanticide, scientists have uncovered other shocking hippo behavior. In times of extreme stress, when food or water runs out, for example, these animals are capable of things we never thought possible. For hundreds of years, we humans believed that hippos were strict vegetarians. We were wrong. This video shows a hippo scavenging the carcass of a buffalo. Hippos have also been observed cannibalizing the remains of their own. There have even been reports of hippos as predators, killing live prey for food. Did these attacks on humans have anything to do with this unexpected, darker side of their nature? And if they did, would there be any way to know what had driven the hippos to such terrifying extremes? The two attacks in the Okavango Delta made some people wonder if the hippos there were suffering severe conditions that could have made them desperate and deadly. In summer, the time of the attacks, this region faces brutal heat. Temperatures can soar to almost 40 degrees Celsius, and life-sustaining water can be hard to come by. Both hippo attacks took place in December, when the rains usually return to the area. But that year they were late, and a desperate drought afflicted much of the region. But a drought in the Okavango doesn't mean there's no water at all. The delta is sustained by a river that flows from distant Angola, where the annual rains are plentiful. These floodwaters move downriver and fan out across the flat land, keeping the oasis alive. There was more than enough water to drink when the attacks occurred. The hippos there weren't stressed enough to have attacked out of desperation. So perhaps the reason lay not in their behavior, but in the behavior of the humans. Another encounter supports this theory. Richard Gumede set off from his home in rural South Africa to go fishing. The only way he had to support his family was through gill netting, but this was illegal, so he did it after dark.
On that day, I left home and went to work at the place where I normally go. That is where I cast my gill net. I then waited for some time until it was around 2.
By the time Richard had finished, it was the dead of night. He then returned his boat to its hiding place in the reeds. That's when it happened.
The hippo appeared suddenly, charging at high speed. When it came at me, I suddenly found my whole head up to the neck inside its mouth. Then it went and threw me away, as you can see from this scar.
Miraculously, Richard Gumede survived with only a few minor wounds. The reason behind his attack soon became clear.
It definitely came from the bushes. Then it continued, charging into the water.
His presence frightened the animal, but he had inadvertently cut it off from its refuge in the river, and so it charged. But the attacks on Janice and Diana didn't seem to fit this scenario. In fact, the hippo that killed Janice Simpson ran out of the water after attacking her.
And you could actually see the bank where it climbed the bank and gone out onto land.
Why did the animal leave its place of refuge? The answer may lie in whether it recognized a friend or a foe, and in signals that we can't even hear.
So Bill, what are we looking at here?
It's actually a voice print. But this is recorded on the surface, and underneath this line are the sounds recorded by a hydrophone, an underwater microphone. So here's the surface sound. And the underwater sound now.
Wow.
You hear something there?
Yeah. Those sound like the clicks that whales make.
They're very similar to whale sounds. In fact, killer whales make a sound just like this.
There's an astonishing reason why these sounds are so similar.
Recently, people have looked at the molecules, the DNA. And when they did that, they found that the DNA of the hippos is very, very similar to the DNA of whales and dolphins, of all things. Interesting. Yeah.
Recent DNA analysis has suggested that the hippo's closest relatives may not be pigs, as many had long believed, but whales and dolphins. Like their seagoing relatives, hippos even give birth underwater, as seen in this footage from Busch Gardens in Tampa Bay. But unlike their giant cousins, hippos don't use their underwater sounds as sonar.
So what are they using it for?
Well, we think they're used for communication. They make these clicks, which are easy to locate, to tell other hippos in the water that I'm coming. Don't beat me up.
If hippos use these underwater clicks to avoid aggressive encounters, perhaps the animals that attacked heard the boaters approaching, but didn't hear a friendly signal. If this were the case, they may have considered the humans a threat. Diana and her film crew were virtually silent as they approached. Except for one thing. The director was walking in the water. Did the animal hear what it considered to be a hostile approach? Hippos actually close their ears underwater, but this doesn't mean that they can't hear.
And you'll notice that this big jaw right here connects right there, and very close to where the inner ear is under the skull. The sound made underwater vibrates this lower jaw. There are big thick parts here that will respond to high frequency sounds, lower frequency sounds back here at the thinner part. So as the vibrations come in through the jaw, they rattle the inner ear, and they can hear the underwater sounds too. Wow. So they can hear in the air with their outer ear, just the way we do. But they can also, with their head in the water, pick up and monitor sounds underwater too. And I don't know of any other animal that does this.
Whether its ears were above or below the water, the hippo probably heard the advancing humans. And without hearing a cautionary call from another hippo, it might have feared the worst. But most hippos would still turn and flee from an unknown intruder. So what made these animals decide to attack? The hippo that attacked Diana Tilden Davis showed no signs of relenting until a nearby colleague shot a flare gun into the air. The noise startled the hippo just long enough for Diana to escape. Looking back, she recalled a telling detail about the animal that had attacked her. The water it was in was shallow.
When he stood up, I mean, his whole head was above the water.
That's quite shallow for a hippo. Water deep enough to submerge himself, that's a basic habitat requirement of a hippo.
When they feel threatened, hippos submerge in deep water, and they can stay under for up to 8 minutes. In the shallows, that wouldn't have been easy.
A hippo would stand this high, and even if it would go lie down, a third of his body would still be out of the water. So actually, for the animal to be able to submerge itself under the water, he would have needed an indentation at the bottom of that canal.
The hippo had made itself just such a place.
Because he was quite big and it was quite shallow, he had made a little sort of wallow in the sand to get completely under the water. He was definitely trying to hide.
Bruce Simpson believes that the animal that killed his wife was also hiding.
The hippo must have been submerged and crouching in the water. So the water couldn't have been deeper than a couple more feet where the hippo was hiding. There's no ways it could have been there unless it was crouching.
Why would two of these fearsome giants go to such lengths to hide?
Bill, these are absolutely formidable animals. I mean, they're just enormous. They have this incredible complement of tusks. I mean, I can't imagine that these things have any natural enemies.
There probably is only one real enemy of hippos, and that's us, human beings. I think we've had weapons capable of killing hippos for at least 50,000 years.
The animals may have been hiding from an ancient adversary.
That would put it roughly 5,000 hippo generations. That's a long time, enough time for evolution to cause changes in the behavior of the hippos to defend themselves against human beings.
Do you think that makes it more likely that these animals would attack humans?
Oh, absolutely. Over the years, we have become an archenemy.
In recent years, the human threat to hippos has worsened. When the world banned elephant ivory in 1989, hippos began to be hunted for their tusks. Over the past 10 years, it's estimated that there's been a 7 to 20% decline in hippo populations. But hippos are protected in the delta, and the recent persecution of hippos elsewhere wouldn't have made those in Botswana more prone to violence. So what had made two animals try to hide, only then to attack, in the span of just 1 week? There was one crucial clue, and Diana saw it as the animal charged.
When he came for us, his mouth was open. Lots of cuts and gashes in his mouth. His ear had been chewed on, and his face was all scarred and open. They were all fresh wounds.
The hippo that attacked her was a badly wounded young bull. And there's only one beast capable of inflicting injuries like these on such a fearsome animal. Another hippo. Though the great bulls can fight at almost any time, the fighting had been especially fierce that December.
We'd heard lots and lots of fighting. All over the place, you hear them everywhere.
Bruce Simpson had heard it too.
There was a lot of fighting going on between the hippos.
There was a reason why the bulls were so aggressive. The annual flood had arrived in the delta, but the previous lack of rain meant that the only places hippos could find the grasses they depended on were right along the channels. This had forced the hippos closer together.
I couldn't even begin to count them. It was one of the things that staggered me was the density of the hippo population.
And this high concentration of massive appetites created another problem.
Because the territories are so small, the grazing's really, really bad. I think they become stressed, so that creates more of an aggression.
With good grazing hard to come by and more rivals close at hand, dominant bulls are prone to attack.
And those are the times when the hippos become very territorial, and there's a lot of fights that break out.
For a young bull, these fights can be lethal, and many try to hide. But when territories are close together, there are few unclaimed places to go.
In a young bull, especially this part of the time of the year when they get chased out of the bigger herds, you know, they're all full of cuts and wounds. I mean, we've seen them quite often in relatively shallow water where they like this, and get sheltered among the reeds.
Beaten, blooded, and perhaps terrified that giant bulls may take their lives, these cornered young hippos hid until the last possible moment, hoping that the approaching threat would go away. And when it didn't, they both fought for their lives and attacked the humans that had unwittingly approached them.
The reason he attacked me was he was injured. An injured animal is totally unpredictable. It's a survival instinct.
Diana Tilden Davis also shows a strong will to live. She spent more than 2 years rehabilitating the leg that was miraculously saved, and already has plans to return to her beloved Delta and its hippos.
I've seen the hippo twice since the incident. He was going through just as a traumatic time as I've been through. So our bond, I think, has grown from that.
Bruce Simpson feels the same way.
One of my goals is to be able to go back and get as much pleasure as I did before out of spending time watching hippos and photographing them. In many respects, I feel like I have a link with them now.
The relationship between humans and hippos may always be a difficult one. The animals' reliance on fresh water will continue to put them at odds with an ever-expanding human population. But whenever we leave our domain and enter that of the hippos, we must remember that our knowledge of these creatures is limited, and our estimation of the natural world often prejudiced. If we forget that there are other animals living lives just as complex as our own, we humans may lose our ancient role as the hunter and instead become the hunted.